Welcome to the This is the Right Way to Deep Clean Hardwood Floors and finally get that layer of grime off.
Yes, welcome.
Because right now, like as you walk across your living room, you are likely stepping on this microscopic layer of crushed rocks, acidic residue, and just polymerized grease.
It's a terrifying thought, honestly.
Right. And the really terrifying part is that your very first instinct when you decide to clean it is probably to drag a wet mop right across that surface,
Oh, absolutely.
which essentially means you are about to permanently sandpaper your own beautiful floors.
Hmm.
I mean, hardwood is a classic beloved feature in homes, right?
Hmm.
But taking care of it can feel incredibly intimidating.
Yeah, it really can.
You look at those pristine planks, or maybe you see a scuff mark or a dull patch, and you're just, paralyzed by the fear of ruining the finish.
Hmm.
Nobody wants to be the person who destroys their floor because they used the wrong soap on a random Tuesday afternoon.
It's a very real anxiety for sure. Hardwood represents a massive investment, both financially and just in terms of the warmth it brings to a space. But that anxiety often leads to total paralysis. Like, we end up treating these floors like fragile museum artifacts.
Yeah, like you can't even look at them wrong.
Exactly. And in our fear of causing irreversible damage, whether that's warping the wood or stripping the sealant or leaving a permanent cloudy haze, we end up neglecting the actual maintenance they require to survive.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is basically a rescue mission for your floors. And honestly, for your peace of mind, too.
Definitely.
We are pulling our insights today from a phenomenal, highly detailed guide published by The Spruce. It was written by home and design expert Emily Bendit-Gaylord. And what really elevates this piece is that she consulted the actual heavy hitters of the flooring and cleaning world.
Right. She went straight to the source.
Exactly. Darren DeWale, Brunson Sayes, and Forrest Weber. So our mission today is to extract their absolute best advice and give you, the listener, the confidence to deep clean your floors safely.
And we are fully embracing these methods.
Yes, fully. Because they are safe, they're surprisingly simple, and most importantly, they actually respect the science of the wood itself.
That's the core of it right there, the science. I mean, the experts in this guide aren't pushing extreme chemical warfare or, industrial floor buffers.
No toxic sludge required.
Right. They advocate for a very grounded approach that works with the organic properties of the material rather than fighting against them. If you actually understand the physical and chemical realities of what hardwood is and what the finish on top of it is doing,
Then the cleaning process suddenly makes perfect sense.
it really does. But we have to look at the physical groundwork before a single drop of water ever touches that floor.
Yeah. Before we even think about the water and soap, you simply can't mop a dirty floor. Let's look closer at that microscopic layer of crushed rocks I mentioned earlier.
The silicates.
Yeah, right. The absolute first step the pros recommend is removing all surface dust and dirt.
Mhm.
You can use a dust mop, a microfiber cloth, a broom, or a vacuum. But the non-negotiable directive here, and this is huge, is that you must move the furniture to expose the entire surface area.
Yeah, you really have to, because the physical mechanics of household dust are fascinating and honestly deeply misunderstood.
How so?
Well, dust isn't just soft, fluffy lint, A significant percentage of household dust is actually composed of silicates.
So like tiny rocks.
Exactly. Microscopic grains of sand, quartz, and soil that get tracked in from the outside. And if we look at the Mohs hardness scale,
Oh, taking it to geology class. I love it.
right, if you look at that scale, quartz is actually harder than almost any polyurethane or aluminum oxide finish applied to a hardwood floor.
Wow. Wait, really?
Yes. Furthermore, dust is completely dictated by the airflow in your home. It drifts on these really subtle air currents and drops in low-pressure zones.
Which happen to be exactly under your sofas.
Right under them, and
Yeah.
behind your media consoles and beneath your bookshelf. So
Yeah.
you don't move the furniture. You are leaving massive reservoirs of abrasive silicates just waiting to drift back out onto your clean floor.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I think people vastly underestimate the abrasive nature of that loose dirt. To me, trying to mop a hardwood floor without meticulously dry sweeping first, it's exactly like trying to wash a car that's covered in a layer of loose, dry beach sand.
Oh, that is the perfect analogy.
Right, if you just throw a wet sponge onto a sandy car and start scrubbing, you aren't cleaning the clear coat. You're taking jagged abrasive particles and grinding them directly into the paint. You'll just scratch to pieces.
That analogy is spot on. Every single time you skip the dry sweep and go straight to the damp mop, you are micro-scratching the finish.
Just destroying.
Yeah, because you're applying downward pressure and lateral movement to those silicates. And over time, that continuous microabrasion totally degrades the protective top layer.
It dulls the shine.
It dulls the shine, and eventually it exposes the raw wood beneath. But there's a secondary, equally disastrous chemical reaction that happens if you skip this step.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. When you introduce a liquid cleaning solution to a floor heavily coated in silicates and organic dust, you are essentially manufacturing mud.
You're just making a slurry.
Precisely. You create an abrasive, wet slurry. And instead of lifting the grime away, your mop just pushes that wet dirt into the microscopic crevices of the wood grain and into the bevels between the planks.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare to get out.
It is, because when that moisture eventually evaporates, it leaves behind a hardened, dull film of mud that is 10 times harder to remove than the dry dust would have been.
So the dry sweep is the gatekeeper. We move the furniture, we get every last silicate off the floor, and only now can we finally bring in the mop.
Exactly.
And this is where the experts really start dropping the technical knowledge. The tool of choice is a microfiber mop, not a traditional string mop. And Darren DeWale gives us what has to be the most critical rule in the entire guide.
The lightly damp rule.
Yes, the mop must only be lightly damp.
What's fascinating here is that we have to talk about the cellular biology of wood to understand why lightly damp is the golden rule.
Okay, break that down for us.
So wood is a highly hygroscopic material.
Meaning it absorbs water.
Right. Even though a tree has been cut down, milled, kiln-dried, and coated in a chemical finish, the wood cells, the xylem and phloem that used to transport water up the trunk of the tree, they still fundamentally behave as if they are alive. They constantly seek to absorb moisture from their environment to reach equilibrium.
It's like a sponge that doesn't realize it's been detached from the ocean.
Exactly. Now, the finish on your floor, whether that's a modern aluminum oxide coating or a traditional polyurethane, it acts as a barrier. But that barrier is almost never completely impermeable.
Because of the micro scratches we just talked about.
Right, from daily wear. And there are also microscopic gaps at the seams where two planks meet. So when you introduce a soaking wet mop, that excess water seeks the path of least resistance.
It finds the cracks.
It pools in the seams, breaches the barrier, and makes direct contact with the raw wood fibers.
And once it hits the raw wood, capillary action takes over, right? The cells just suck the water right in.
Yes. And as the cells absorb that water, they physically swell.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And because the bottom of the plank is usually secured to the subfloor and remains relatively dry, while the top of the plank is expanding from the moisture.
It warps.
Right. The edges of the wood rise up. This creates a concave shape across the surface of the plank. It's a condition known in the flooring industry as cupping.
Cupping. That sounds expensive to fix.
Very. It permanently distorts the floor. It can also cause the protective finish to delaminate and just peel off entirely. So DeWale's instruction to use a lightly damp mop is really an exercise in starving the floor of that excess moisture.
You want just enough liquid to act as a vehicle for the cleaning agent.
Right.
But little enough that the wood's cellular structure is never threatened.
Exactly.
We want to wipe its face, not drown it.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've wrung out our microfiber mop until our hands literally ache. What goes into the bucket. The Spruce Guide lays out a couple of options.
Right.
You can use a commercial hardwood cleaner. And if you do, they stress you must strictly follow the dilution instructions. But they also offer a highly accessible alternative that I find fascinating.
The dish soap.
Yes,
Yeah.
just a few tablespoons of dish soap mixed into warm water.
The dish soap recommendation is a brilliant application of basic chemistry. I mean, the grime we are trying to remove from a floor, especially in high-traffic areas or kitchens, it's rarely just loose dirt.
No, it's sticky.
Right. It's often lipid-based. It's aerosolized cooking oils that have settled or, body oils tracked in from bare feet or dropped food residues. And water alone cannot dissolve oil.
Because they don't mix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But dish soap is packed with surfactants.
Let's break down the surfactants. How are they actually lifting that grease off the wood? I want the molecular breakdown here.
Okay, so a surfactant molecule has two ends. One end is hydrophilic, meaning it loves water.
Okay, loved water.
And the other end is hydrophobic, meaning it repels water, but it binds incredibly well to fats and oils.
Oh, I see where this is going.
So when you apply that lightly damp, soapy water to the floor, the hydrophobic tails of the soap molecules instantly attach themselves to the microscopic layers of grease on your floor.
They just grab onto the fat.
They surround it. Meanwhile, the hydrophilic heads are pulling toward the water on your mop. So it essentially creates a molecular bridge that lifts the oil off the polyurethane finish.
That is so
It
cool.
holds it in suspension in the water, allowing the microfiber to just whisk it away. And because dish soap is relatively pH neutral, it achieves this without using highly acidic or highly alkaline chemicals that would etch or degrade the floor sealant.
But the restraint is key here, right? The guide says a few tablespoons, because the human instinct is always like, well, if a little soap is good, half a bottle will make it sterile.
Oh, absolutely. But we have to trust the chemistry over our muscles. So true. Okay, so you've washed a section of the floor with your lightly damp mop. The wood is gleaming, and this is the exact moment where almost everyone makes a massive fundamental mistake.
The biggest mistake.
And most people stop right here. They pack up the bucket, they walk away, and they let the ambient air do the rest. But according to our pros, stopping here is a complete disaster.
It really is the difference between an illusion of cleanliness and actual long-term maintenance. Relying on air drying when dealing with a hygroscopic material is a profound risk, regardless of how well you wrung out the mop.
The third step the experts insist on is the dry-as-you-go method.
Crucial step.
Yeah, as you finish mopping a small section, you must immediately go over that damp area with a dry mop or a dry microfiber cloth to actively soak up the remaining liquid. Cleaning Pro Forrest Weber highly recommends this section-by-section approach.
He really emphasizes it. Now, I have to admit, when I first read that, my immediate thought was about efficiency. I mean, we live in an era of central air conditioning and ceiling fans. If the mop was only lightly damp to begin with, how much damage could that microscopic film of evaporating water really do?
It sounds like overkill, right?
Exactly. Why add an entirely separate, highly tedious physical step to a chore that's already demanding enough?
It totally seems redundant until you look at what's actually in that microscopic film of water.
Okay.
We already discussed the mechanical threat of moisture seeping into the seams and causing cupping. So actively drying the floor is your ultimate insurance policy against that water damage.
Right.
But the second issue is chemical. And it's actually the #1 complaint homeowners have about hardwood floors.
Let me guess. The dreaded cloudy streaks.
The streaks, yes.
Oh, the streaks are the worst.
Yeah.
You put in an hour of hard work, the floor looks like a literal mirror when it's wet, and then 20 minutes later it looks like a giant cloudy snail has been doing figure eights across your dining room.
It is maddening.
It's so maddening. What is the actual mechanism causing that?
Streaks are nothing more than stranded residue. You see, the warm water in your bucket is likely tap water. And tap water contains dissolved minerals like calcium and magnesium.
Right, hard water.
Exactly. And of course, you added surfactants from the dish soap. So when you allow the floor to air dry, only the H2O molecules evaporate into a gas.
Oh, I see.
The heavy mineral deposits and the unrinsed soap molecules do not evaporate. They are left behind, resting directly on the finish. And because you applied the liquid with a mop, those deposits dry in the exact swipe pattern of your mop strokes.
Wow. So by actively drying the floor with a clean microfiber cloth, you are physically extracting those minerals and the leftover soap before the water can evaporate and strand them there.
Precisely. You are removing the water while it is still holding the residue in suspension.
This troubleshooting advice from Brunson says is incredibly validating. He notes that if you are getting streaks, it's almost always because you are using too much soap or your mop is too wet.
Yeah.
You just have to go easy on the products.
It's a cascading failure, really. If you overload the bucket with soap, you increase the ratio of surfactants to water exponentially.
Right.
So even if you actively dry the floor section by section, a heavily concentrated soapy solution will completely overwhelm the dry microfiber cloth.
It just can't pick it all up.
Right. Instead of absorbing the residue, the cloth becomes saturated and just begins smearing a dense film of soap back and forth across the wood. Sayes is reminding us that the chemical solution is merely an assistant.
The mechanical action is a star.
Exactly. The mechanical action of the microfiber lifting the dirt is the main event.
But what if you are inheriting a nightmare? Like, let's say you just bought a house, or maybe you've been using cheap, heavy floor polishes for years, and the floors already have this thick, persistent, cloudy film that just won't budge.
That happens a lot.
Right. The pros actually have a triage protocol for film buildup. They recommend buffing it out using either a commercial wood cleaner mixed with water or a DIY solution of water and vinegar.
Vinegar is a very interesting choice here.
Yeah, I want to isolate the vinegar recommendation
Hmm.
because we literally just talked about how dish soap works because it's pH neutral.
Yeah.
Why on earth are we suddenly introducing an acid?
That's a very astute observation, actually, and it speaks directly to the nature of what that cloudy buildup is, because that film isn't loose dirt, it is a polymerized accumulation.
Well, what?
A polymerized accumulation. Basically, over months or years, unrinsed alkaline soap residues, calcium from hard water, and acrylics from cheap floor polishes, they all cross-link and bond together into a hardened, highly alkaline shell on top of your finish.
Oh, wow. So it's basically a crust.
It's a crust. And because it's alkaline, a neutral pH dish soap simply can't break the chemical bonds.
Okay, that makes sense.
You need an opposing force on the pH scale. The acetic acid in vinegar is fantastic at breaking down those alkaline polymerized chains. It chemically shatters the hardened residue.
But there's a catch, right?
A big catch. The application is highly specific. You aren't sloshing vinegar water everywhere. You are applying it very carefully and using the mechanical friction of a microfiber cloth to buff out the degraded layer.
So it's very targeted.
Right. It's a restorative chemical intervention to return the floor to its pristine baseline finish. It's not for weekly cleaning.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
We're using the acid selectively to break the armor of the buildup.
Exactly.
Before we transition into how we protect this incredibly hard work we've just done and keep those silicates from ever returning, I want to take a quick second. Make sure to visit Kindeke Carpet Cleaning on Google.
Great tip.
All right, so the floors are gleaming. We've mastered the dry sweep, the lightly damp mop, and the rigorous dry-as-you-go chemistry.
The holy trinity of floor cleaning.
Truly. But let's face reality here. We cannot do this highly meticulous, furniture-moving, hands-and-knees routine every single week.
No, it's totally unsustainable.
Right. So if we've solved the chemical problem of cleaning, we now face the mechanical problem of prevention. How do we extend the timeline between deep cleans?
This requires a shift from active intervention to passive defense systems.
I like the sound of that. Passive defense systems.
It's exactly what it is. The experts in our source material lay out a behavioral framework for upkeep. If you implement these strategies, you are manipulating the environment to drastically reduce the amount of kinetic and chemical wear your floors experience daily.
And the undisputed heavyweight champion of these preventative strategies is the no shoes policy. The experts point to this as their absolute #1 tip.
Without a doubt.
And I know for some households, this requires a massive cultural shift, getting everyone to take off their shoes at the door. But when you look at the physics of it, it's undeniable.
It is the most effective bottleneck you can possibly create. We already talked about shoes tracking and silicates and bacteria, but the mechanical threat certain shoes pose is severe.
The guide specifically calls out stiletto heels. And I really want to do the math on this because the physics of a stiletto heel impacting a hardwood floor is just wild.
The math is genuinely shocking. So, pressure is defined as force divided by area, right?
Right.
A person walking flat-footed distributes their body weight across dozens of square inches, but a stiletto heel focuses a massive portion of that kinetic energy into a point roughly 1/4 of an inch in diameter.
Sometimes even less.
Often less. So if you have a 120-pound person walking in stilettos, the localized pressure exerted on the floor can easily exceed 2,000 pounds per square inch.
2,000 psi. I mean, to put that in perspective, an adult elephant walking on its wide, flat feet only exerts about 50 to 100 psi on the ground.
It's crazy to think about.
You are literally subjecting your living room floor to a force 20 times greater than an elephant's footstep.
Precisely. And when that tiny hardened tip strikes an oak or maple floor, the polyurethane coating and the cellular structure of the wood beneath it simply cannot withstand the compression.
It just gives way.
The wood fibers physically crush, collapsing inward, and you are left with permanent crescent-shaped craters in the floor.
Oh, I've seen those. They look awful.
And no amount of chemical buffing or microfiber mopping will ever uncrush a wood fiber. The damage is structural and permanent. So a strict no-shoes policy entirely neutralizes that structural threat right at the door.
So we stop the stilettos and the street gravel at the door. But we also need layered defenses, which leads to the advice on frequent sweeping and deploying doormats. Darren DeWale advises placing mats at all entry points.
It's about creating a kinetic quarantine zone.
A kinetic quarantine zone. Explain that.
Well, you want an aggressive, bristled mat on the exterior to physically scrape the heavy macroscopic debris out of the treads of your footwear.
Okay, the tough mat outside.
Right. And then a softer, highly absorbent mat on the interior to catch residual moisture and microscopic dust. If that layered defense is executed properly, the volume of environmental abrasives that actually reach the hardwood drops precipitously.
You catch it at the border.
Exactly.
But the elements are relentless. The guide gives very specific instructions regarding water from rain or snow on shoes and boots. You have to store wet shoes in a garage, on tile, or on a dedicated rubber mat with a raised lip. And if a puddle forms, you clean it immediately.
We circle right back to the thermal and cellular realities of wood here. If you come inside from a blizzard and leave a snow-covered boot on the hardwood, you are creating a slow-motion, localized flood.
It sounds bad.
It is. As that snow melts, the water pools over the seams, and the ambient heat of the house causes thermal expansion in the wood.
Oh, opening up the seams.
Right. It subtly widens those micro gaps, allowing the water to seep down into the subfloor level. You will see localized warping and dark, irreversible staining right at your entryway.
So the rubber mat acts as a necessary containment vessel.
It's essential.
Now, I absolutely love this next piece of advice from Forrest Weber. He recommends using rugs in high-traffic areas, and he describes them as cozy coat of armor. That is such a vivid, brilliant phrase.
It really is. It perfectly encapsulates the philosophy of strategic sacrifice in interior design.
Strategic sacrifice.
Yeah, because we interact with our homes in highly predictable geometries. We don't just wander randomly. We walk the exact same path down the center of the hallway thousands of times. We stand in the exact same pivot point in front of the kitchen sink.
We create invisible highways in our own houses.
Exactly, and those high traffic lanes experience exponential kinetic wear compared to the perimeters of the room.
Right.
So by laying down an area rug or a runner in those specific zones, you are intentionally transferring the destructive friction of daily life away from your incredibly expensive, difficult to refinish hardwood.
And putting it onto the rug.
Right. Onto a piece of textile that is literally manufactured to be abraded and eventually replaced.
It's a sacrificial layer. You let the rug take the damage so the wood doesn't have to. It's so much cheaper to replace a hallway runner than to hire a crew to sand down and restain your hallway.
Exponentially cheaper.
Okay, we need to talk about pets, because the guide outlines a few directives here. Trim pet nails to prevent scratching, use beds to keep them off the wood, and crucially, clean pet messes immediately to stop liquid from seeping into the grain.
Yes, very important.
Now, I want to push back on this last point a little bit. Keeping nails trimmed makes total sense, but treat pet messes immediately. I feel like this advice exists in a vacuum.
How do you mean?
Well, if you work an 8-hour day outside the house and your dog has an accident at 10 a.m., you aren't getting to it until 5 p.m. It feels like an impossible standard that just induces guilt for pet owners. Is it really immediate or nothing?
That is a highly practical pushback, and you're absolutely right that we need to view this through the lens of risk mitigation, not a moral failing of the homeowner.
Right.
The experts emphasize the word immediately because they are intimately familiar with the brutal chemical reaction taking place.
What's the reaction?
Well, pet urine is not just water. It contains uric acid, ammonia, and various proteins. When it sits on an organic material like wood, two things happen simultaneously. First, the moisture attempts to penetrate the cellular structure, causing the swelling we discussed.
Right. Copy.
Second, the uric acid actively burns and etches the polyurethane finish. But the real nightmare occurs if the acid breaches the finish and reaches the raw wood.
What happens then?
The acid reacts violently with the natural tannins present in woods like oak.
Oh, like the chemical reaction used to make old iron gall ink.
Exactly. That reaction physically turns the wood fibers black. It is not a stain sitting on the wood. The wood itself has been chemically transmuted into a dark pigment.
Oh, wow. So you can't just wash that off.
No, that cannot be sanded out. The board usually has to be physically cut out and replaced.
Yikes. Okay, I understand the urgency now.
Yeah, so the advice is grounded in the reality of that timeline. If you are home, you must treat a spill as a drop-everything emergency to prevent that chemical burn.
And if you're at work?
If you are at work for 8 hours, you accept the elevated risk, and perhaps you alter the environment by confining the pet to a room with linoleum or tile while you're away. The core truth remains. The longer the chemical sits, the deeper it seeps, and the more catastrophic the damage becomes.
It's all about minimizing the contact time whenever humanly possible.
Yeah.
If you hear a glass shatter in the kitchen, you don't wait for the commercial break. you move.
Exactly.
But chaos is inevitable, right? Even with our no-shoes policy, our quarantine mats, our cozy coats of armor, and our trimmed dog nails, life just happens.
Always does.
A dinner guest drops a greasy plate, or a potted plant overflows. How do we perform triage? We need to spot treat these disasters without resorting to a method that strips the finish we just spent an hour protecting.
Right. Triage is tricky.
Brenson says gives us the golden rule here. The sooner you address a stain, the easier it will be to remove. But before we touch any specific stain, the guide demands a critical disclaimer.
The most important step.
You must always test any cleaner or solution in a small, inconspicuous area first.
This cannot be overstated. When you are spot treating, you are applying a concentrated chemical directly to a localized area. You must run a controlled scientific experiment in the back corner of a closet or under a heavy piece of furniture before you try it in the middle of the room.
Because finishes are different, right?
Exactly. You are verifying chemical compatibility because finishes vary wildly from UV-cured urethane to traditional waxes. A chemical that lifts a stain on one floor might instantly dissolve the sealant on another,
Leaving you with a giant bleached ring right in your line of sight.
which is much worse than the original stain.
It takes 2 minutes and saves you thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Play it safe. All right, let's look at the specific triage protocols. First, water stains.
Okay.
These usually present as small, cloudy white spots. It happens when someone drops an ice cube and kicks it under the sofa. Duale recommends using a soft cloth with a small amount of baking soda paste to gently lift the mark. What is the baking soda actually doing here?
To understand the fix, you have to understand the symptom. A white water stain is actually good news.
It is.
Yes. The white color indicates that the moisture has only penetrated the topmost layer of the finish. It is trapped inside the polyurethane, but hasn't reached the wood itself. If the stain were dark, it means it breached the finish and hit the wood.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
Because the moisture is trapped in the finish, baking soda is the perfect intervention. Sodium bicarbonate is a highly mild crystalline abrasive.
Like a scrub.
Right. When you create a paste with a tiny drop of water and rub it very gently over the white spot, you are performing a microexfoliation. You are microscopically sanding away the uppermost layer of the finish, just enough to allow the trapped moisture to escape and evaporate, but not enough to burn down to the raw wood.
It's a literal skin scrub for your floor.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, what about grease? You drop a piece of buttery toast face down. The guide says to use a single drop of dish soap mixed with water on a damp cloth. But they scream a massive warning: do not scrub too hard or you'll damage the floor.
This brings us right back to the surfactant science. You apply that single drop of soap, and you must give the hydrophobic tails a few seconds to seek out and bind to the lipid molecules of the butter or grease.
You have to let it sit.
You are waiting for emulsification. And the warning against scrubbing is vital. Human instinct says if it's sticky, apply elbow grease.
Oh, I'm definitely guilty of that.
We all are. But if you bear down on a damp cloth and furiously scrub a single spot on a hardwood floor, the intense localized friction will rapidly heat and degrade the polyurethane.
You'll literally rub the finish right off.
You will physically burn through the protective barrier, leaving a permanently dull, scratched patch that reflects light differently than the rest of the floor. You have to let the chemistry do the heavy lifting, not your muscles.
And if the stain is incredibly stubborn,
Yeah.
if the baking soda or the emulsification isn't working,
At that threshold, Duale advises abandoning DIY methods and acquiring a commercial hardwood safe cleaner specifically formulated for your exact type of finish. Guesswork at this stage almost guarantees localized damage.
better safe than sorry. Which brings us perfectly to the most dramatic and frankly terrifying part of our deep dive, the absolute do-nots.
Oh yes, the danger zone.
These are the practices you must banish from your mind completely. And I really want to look closely at steam mops.
Okay.
I see commercials for these constantly. They are marketed as the ultimate purifying, chemical-free shortcut. Just the raw, sterilizing power of superheated steam slicing through grime. It sounds like a miracle. Can we use a steam mop to speed up this deep clean?
I will be as emphatic as the experts in the Spruce Guide. Absolutely not. You must never let a steam mop touch a hardwood floor.
But why? It's literally just water. And because it's so hot, it evaporates almost instantly, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that solve the moisture problem?
It's an issue of thermodynamics and the mechanism of delivery. We established earlier that liquid water pooling on the floor is bad. But a steam mop takes that water and superheats it into a pressurized vapor. Vapor is a gas. Unlike liquid water, which relies on surface tension and gravity, a highly pressurized, superheated gas behaves entirely differently. It will actively force its way down through the microscopic fissures in your floor's sealant.
Oh, no.
It easily penetrates the bevels between the boards and injects moisture directly into the cellular structure of the raw wood.
So you were basically firing boiling moisture past the armor.
Exactly. And the consequences are catastrophic. The extreme heat combined with the rapid moisture absorption causes violent thermal expansion and swelling within the wood cells.
So they warp even faster.
The boards will warp almost immediately. Furthermore, the sheer temperature of the steam can actually melt, cloud, or completely delaminate plastic-based finishes like polyurethane.
It just melts the plastic.
It causes the sealant to bubble and peel right off the wood. A steam mop is essentially a highly efficient torture device designed to destroy the two things that make up your floor, the wood and the seal. It is the exact opposite of the lightly damp rule.
I am officially horrified. Throw the steam mop in the garbage.
Seriously, do not use it on hardwood.
The second absolute do not is the use of harsh scrubbing pads. Steel wool, heavy-duty scouring sponges, or stiff abrasive brushes. The guide is very clear that these will scratch the floor and wear away the protective layer.
Again, it's a matter of localized structural failure. Polyurethane is tough, but it is not impenetrable armor. If you take a scouring pad to a stubborn piece of dried food, you are acting as a localized human sander.
Right.
It will physically shear off the finish, exposing the raw wood beneath to the ambient air and future moisture. The only way to fix that is to sand down the entire plank and restain it. Put the scouring pad down and stick to the microexfoliation of the microfiber cloth.
Finally, I have to ask about a product that is basically a cultural touchstone, Murphy oil soap.
Ah, yes.
I feel like the smell of it is pure nostalgia. Everyone's grandmother used it to clean wood. What does the guide say about this classic?
The guide provides some crucial nuance here. Murphy oil soap can be a viable choice, but it is highly dependent on the era of your floor's finish. Yeah. Many modern hardwood floors are sealed with highly advanced factory-applied aluminum oxide or hard polyurethane layers. These essentially encase the wood in a hard plastic shell. Heavy, oil-based soaps do not interact well with these modern, non-porous barriers.
Because the oil can't soak in.
Right. The oil just sits on top, leading directly back to that cloudy, polymerized film buildup we discussed earlier.
Oh, it just turns into crust.
Exactly. However, for older floors, those with wax finishes or traditional penetrating oil finishes, an oil soap can be beneficial, as those finishes are designed to be periodically nourished with oil.
This really depends on the floor.
It does. But the experts emphasize that even when it is appropriate for your specific finish, it must be used exceedingly sparingly and strictly according to the manufacturer's dilution ratios.
So it's not a blanket ban, but it requires a very specific knowledge of your own floor's chemistry. Proceed with extreme caution.
Very well said.
So let's pull this entire universe of information together. Let's look at the winning formula we've extracted from Emily Benda Gaylord's guide and the experts at the Spruce. If you want to deep clean your floors and finally get that layer of grime off without causing catastrophic cellular or chemical damage, here is the blueprint.
The ultimate blueprint.
First, the dry sweep. Move the furniture, understand the airflow, and remove the abrasive silicates so you aren't manufacturing mud.
Crucial first step.
Second, the wash.
Yeah.
Rely on the chemistry of surfactants by using a lightly damp microfiber mop with just a tiny bit of dish soap in warm water.
Trust the molecules.
Third, the rigorous drying phase. Defy the urge to walk away. Work section by section and dry immediately with a clean microfiber cloth to extract the minerals and prevent water damage and streaks.
Don't let it air dry.
And then, build your passive defenses. Stop the 2,000 PSI stilettos with a strict no-shoes policy. Protect your borders with layered exterior and interior mats.
Kinetic quarantine.
Give your high-traffic pivot points a cozy coat of armor with sacrificial rugs. Manage the thermal expansion of wet boots with rubber trays, and treat the uric acid of pet messes as a chemical emergency.
When you look at the entirety of that protocol, it really leaves you with something profound to ponder.
What's that?
Well, we live in an era that is completely obsessed with high-tech gadgets, superheated steam devices, extreme chemical interventions, and the constant search for a dramatic shortcut.
Oh, absolutely.
Yet, isn't it fascinating how the absolute best way to care for something as valuable, organic, and enduring as a hardwood floor relies entirely on a strict less is more approach?
It really is wild when you think about it.
The formula for success isn't found in a powerful machine. It's found in less water, incredibly gentle soap, the soft physical touch of a microfiber cloth, and mindful preventative habits. Those quiet, scientifically sound, almost analog methods are ultimately far superior to any harsh, modern intervention we could throw at it.
It really is a masterclass in restraint. Less truly is more when it comes to preserving the integrity of the things that matter.
I couldn't agree more.
Be sure to visit Kindeke Carpet Cleaning on Google.
Good advice.
Thank you for listening to the This is a Right Way to Deep Clean Hardwood Floors. And finally, get that layer of Grime off podcast.